Today, we are talking about top best practices for zero trust and OT security. And it's a pleasure to me to have three fantastic speakers in this panel. First, let me introduce to Jim Montgomery, Principal Solution Architect at Xtone. Hello, Jim. And Jim has it's a 30 years veteran of IT security, and he's working in all aspects of solution design, development, deployment, implementation. And during this time, Jim has helped several Fortune 100 companies to implement complex strategies for operational efficiency and secure processing. Second speaker is Edward Turkaly, Director of Cybersecurity Offer Management at Schneider Electric. Hello, Edward. And he describes himself as a major and senior member in cybersecurity industry since 18 years, with a strong experience from working with commercial and government clients. And last but not least, it's Don Davidson, Director Cyber SCRM Programs at Synopsys. Welcome, Don. And he has as well an experience, a very long experience working with federal services, and as well the last over decades. And he's really specialized in supply chain risk management. Hello, Don. And myself, I'm the moderator of this session. I have the pleasure. My name is Mirko Ross. I'm CEO of Ashwin, as well a cybersecurity expert and a veteran of this industry. So, hello together. And I mean, wow, we have a very interesting topic. Zero trust in OT. To be honest, to me, it was always more an IT topic. It was always like, oh, the IT industry can easily turn, not easily, but can turn into zero trust strategies. But OT is so much more complex with all this hardware conditions and stuff like that. How can we bring in zero trust into OT? And I would like to know a little bit about your views. And may we start with Jim? So what is your opinion and your view about that?
Yeah, so bringing zero trust into OT environments is the principles are similar, right? You're still trying to define your environment as primarily already being compromised. So starting from that basis, you look at your protection strategies. The protection strategies in IT, very specific to users. So, user access, user validation, user access validation, what should they be in, what should they not be in? Different in OT, right? You just spin that from the user to the asset. So now you're talking about physical assets rather than specific users, controlling access based upon what that asset should be communicating with, what that asset should be doing, its function, the importance of that asset. So just different considerations. The primary principle, the primary understanding of a compromised environment and protecting against that is really the same. How you focus on it based upon user or asset is where the big difference happens, IT to OT.
Good, great. Ed, what is your initial ideas of zero trust in OT technology?
Well, thank you for having me here. My role is bringing new cybersecurity offers to our customers, so it's very important for me on this topic. Zero trust is different than IEC 62443 to me. First and foremost, zero trust does not take into consideration health and safety. The priority of 62443 is to protect the integrity and availability of processes in the plant and the data traveling across that plant. Zero trust for OT must recognize that SCADA, in our case, is the central repository of truth, and it knows all. So zero trust must protect SCADA, otherwise we have cyber physical consequences, including environmental health and safety, potential life and death consequences. So that's an important distinction, I think.
Great. Last question to the veteran in the show. Don, so zero trust.
Yeah, so I hate the terminology. I actually think a better phrase would be zero absolute trust, because it's not like you're going to go back and validate, the credentials and all of the other history every time you communicate with a device or a person. So I think it's an issue of how much can you trust the communication, the data, the person? And it goes back to how often are you communicating with them? How often have you validated their content? And when it's working in an IT system, an information system, a network, that's fairly often. And so if you've seen them every day and they're communicating and things are working well, their credentials look good, then you have some trust and confidence. But if you haven't had a communication with them in several weeks, then you have to sort of verify who they are, where are they coming from, and the content. That is complex when you get to the OT world because it's not always fully connected. And so you may have this periodicity, you may have gaps of communication from that device. So it actually, in that construct, makes it a little more difficult for the OT world. It doesn't mean it can't be used. I'm a firm believer of you go after zero trust by a continuing diagnostics and monitoring and mitigations concept, just like you would information systems. So you have to be concerned about the last time you communicated with this person or this device, and how did you gain trust to use that data last time? And then that's the way you manage zero trust, in my opinion. And I do like the construct of always thinking about your system is probably compromised.
Yes, gentlemen, I think this is a very good baseline for our discussion here. Now, as this is an interactive session, we would like to invite the audience out there as well to participate. And you have several options. First of all, we have prepared a poll. So join the polling. It should start now. And for the poll, we were asking you, well, how far along is your organization with implementing OT cyber defense? So we would like to know if you are in an organization, well, are you already there, or do you have still some miles to go, or are you on the last miles? And there are several questions. It would be great if you can just join the poll, let us know a bit what is your stage of OT security. That's the first thing, and then we can as well go within the discussion towards the answer on the poll. And you have as well a second option. We have a chat. If you have any questions to our panelists during the sessions, just type in the chat, and if we have the opportunity to grab it, and then our panelists are happy to answer it. I think so. And these are your two options. So join the poll, and we see now here the first result of the poll. Let me just tell you. So we have asked, how far along is your organization with implementing OT cyber defense? First question, completed. It's 10%. OT networks and assets are fully protected. Let me tell you, it's never completed. Underway, implementing our OT cybersecurity strategy now. Well, it's as well 33%, and that's as well interesting. Then getting started, learning and identifying our security needs, 23%. No need, OT is fully air-gapped, 3%. So don't care about cyber, okay? And
I would comment there, probably 10 years ago, that would have been a bigger answer for fully air-gapped. I think more people understand rarely is a device ever fully air-gapped.
Exactly. And last but not least, unsure. I think that's as well very valid, that 30% don't know really what's going in detail going on. So I think a rather interesting result. I mean, so any one of you would like to pick up one of these questions? Otherwise, I will, because it's rather interesting. We gave us an answer. Oh, we are ready. It's all finished, and I believe that's not true. It's a lifetime challenge, especially in OT. So, anyone wants to pick about, like, what are the challenges? What makes OT so different towards zero trust, towards IT?
Sure.
Ed?
I'll be happy to jump in there. If you take the word zero trust word by word and applied it to Purdue level 1 and 2, the Purdue model on a sensor, it likely would kill the sensor and shut down the plant. The sensor may only have 128 kilobits of memory. In that sense, zero trust can be very aspirational, and it's not really designed to address those lower functions of the Purdue model. From a greenfield perspective, using the same sensor, adding in zero trust may triple its price. So we take these things into consideration. Secondly, the zero trust model, including this SP 800-207, it doesn't specifically address the various stakeholders like IEC does. It doesn't address where it applies to the asset owner, to the system integrator, or to the technology provider. So it's not really tailored prescriptive the way it needs to be to make sure that it's actually practical. So, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make sure that we're leveraging the principles of zero trust philosophically, but doing it in a safe way.
Yes, so it's different because we have as well different capabilities at the endpoint, isn't it? Like there are several restrictions in OT, where from IT perspective, you are maybe not faced. Like take my iPhone, it has the several computing power and processing power of many OT devices out there. So how to implement zero trust? Even you can't implement maybe clients doing collecting telemetry or any special things on that. That's a really valid point. So Don, from your perspective, so will we ever finished an OT?
No, yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's continual, right? First of all, it's gaining visibility to all of your assets. I mean, you have to gain asset visibility, and then you have to monitor those. Now, you won't be able to monitor as much, like I said, in the OT world as you can in the IT world, but you still have to manage some sort of monitoring. I worked in the federal government for 44 plus years and retired in 2019, focusing the last 15 on supply chain risk management and how hardware assurance and software assurance impacts information systems and industrial control systems, and work in that arena. If you're serious about supply chain and how you gain trust and confidence, that's still an ongoing challenge for us as an ecosystem. So I went into the private sector, I went to Synopsys, as far left as you can go into the life cycle design, and as far down the technology stack, we design chips and we test software. And so that sort of gives you some of the evidence that would lead you to a trust that would help you make a zero trust decision on whether you trust it. There are two articles that white papers that I contributed to in the National Defense Industrial Association, one on digital thread back in 2016 for the manufacturing division, that talked about this need for a collection of data that's going to inform your information system and confirm your operational environment. That's still an ongoing challenge for us with SBOM and HBOM, working for this digital bill of materials kind of world. And then most recently, I worked with National Defense Industrial Association to write a paper on zero trust, about a 50-page diatribe, if you would, on all of the ins and outs, which was primarily focused on information systems, to be honest, not as much in the operational technology world. But I think it's of value, and I think those are free, available on the NDIA website. If you can't get to them and would like them, just send me a note and I can forward them to you, because they really give a defense industrial based look at this challenge space.
Yeah, okay, good. And last but not least, Jim. So the same question to you. So what are the lifetime challenges then? Can we say we have already reached the stage, lean back, look at our zero trust?
Yeah, interesting perspectives. I really appreciate the other panelists and their perspectives on things. Attacks are constantly changing, right? So how they're perpetrating the attack, how they're getting in. You can be at a point in time complete based upon your goals, but you're never really finished because it evolves. It's evolving. We're constantly chasing. Going back a little bit to the differences between IT and OT, when you look at operating systems, when you look at hardware refresh cycles, when you look at just the challenges and differences in how the operations actually function, availability versus confidentiality, there's a lot of differences. And that's why there's challenges trying to move an IT type of mentality or solution set into OT. it presents a lot of challenges just based on operating systems and refresh cycles. But yeah, you're never really completely done, and at the point you think you're done, something changes. So
yes. So at this point, let me invite the audience. If you have any questions to all three of our panelists, Ed, Don, Jim, just type them into the chat and we'll pick that up during the discussion. And here's the first question. Barry Kogan would like to know, well, it's a tooling discussion. Could you please discuss tool to test zero trust in IoT devices? It's a good question. I mean, first there's the concept, isn't it? Then there's the way how you want to implement it. And then there's the tooling. So Barry, yes, I will hand that over. But however, I think we'll come back to the discussion later on to discuss a little bit more the concept and how to implement it. And then maybe tooling is as well a very good topic. So let me just go first, discussing a little bit more the concept, and then we'll pick back later the question of Barry maybe about tooling. So the concept. So there's one interesting fact. I mean, zero trust is an IT concept, and then we have the OT world, and then we have this convergence where everything is coming together in the middle, where IT and OT is merging. But however, we have this both ends still, IT and OT. So what do you think towards, and this question is to Jim, so is this convergence issue still relevant, or have you already managed that? So is it still a topic, yes or not, especially when we go to zero trust?
yeah, convergence, it depends on who you talk to, right? Some people are saying convergence is over. It's died 5 years ago. I've never seen convergence stop. I'm not sure that there is a starting and a stopping point for IT/OT convergence. At its simplest definition, it's just a sharing of ideas and merging of ideas and practices between IT and OT, right? Everyone is somewhere on a continuum, depending upon where they're at in their implementations of protection strategies in OT. So the challenge is not necessarily about, is convergence over? The challenge is, have we applied policies and have we applied baselines to our OT infrastructure that are sufficient to protect it in a zero trust type of fashion? So when you're talking about zero trust and talking about convergence, for me, convergence never ends. I mean, you're constantly in a dialogue between IT and OT, developing solutions, balancing best practices, developing the philosophies, and then moving forward based upon what you discover. So for me, convergence never really, there's not a start and an end. It's just an ongoing process.
Okay, great. Towards Ed, it's like, okay, I know you have prepared something like an overview of kind of what networks, or how does it look like on a network level with zero trust. And I would give you the chance just to share it with us and your thoughts out there. And maybe I think it's as well for the audience very good for following the discussion, to get a better understanding on a network level. What does it mean? So please, Ed, share your screen and then your thoughts on that.
So NIST SP 80207 defines zero trust as 7 tenets. 62443 or IEC 62443 never says zero trust explicitly, but it is implicitly implied by the various defined IEC security levels. What I'm sharing here is a map of the 7 tenets of zero trust and the IEC foundational requirements. I'm not going to read it, but I just wanted to real simply show that this is something that can be mapped. We are looking at zero trust, the tenets, and how that applies to the 62443. As we mentioned earlier, zero trust architectures, they consider the network, the data, the assets as already compromised. And I personally agree with this 100%. It really breaks down the concept of the word perimeter. The networks are not really located in a perimeter behind six walls anymore. They're constantly expanding and contracting with cloud, remote users. You have USB sticks, you have updates being applied. So I think that Zero Trust has got the right approach philosophically, and I agree with what you said earlier, which was that, you know, from a phased approach, we want to include technology that shows the organization their data flow in real time. We believe this is the cornerstone first step, and there's plenty of technologies to do this to help assess the architecture, the users and services that they need to run the business. And this helps identifying how all users, application services, and communication flows are authenticating. So that's the first step. And then the second step is to make those more granular authorizations in those authentications, limiting it to specific actions. And this may include vendor access management solutions, industrial secure remote access, application-centric infrastructure, or even software-defined networks. And then finally, we're getting down to the third step here, where we're using more advanced technologies to assess the authentication and authorization. Stuff like extended threat prevention, AI, micro-segmentation, including intrusion prevention when it's done safely, to detect and automate the response for these anomalies. So I think I see it as a phased approach, and I see how it applies to the IEC 62443 series. That's what I would add.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points. I tend to think about this challenge in an overly simplistic way, and it is cartoonish in some respects. But information systems and networks, we have put in place access controls and role-based access in that arena. So we have read and write authorities. You can see data from a confidentiality perspective, or you can write to it and change integrity and stuff. When we first started adopting these concepts into the OT world and started having devices connected, we're smart in a building, think a smart building, to have a control center and a control room with key card access. We would never think of putting that control room on the sidewalk so people could walk up and change, you know, your HVAC, your power controls, your elevator controls on the sidewalk with anybody gaining access. Unfortunately, that did happen in some spaces. Not that they put the control room, but when they gave internet access to people without passwords or fixed passwords in that arena, you actually now lose control of access. And that's what we have to regain control over in some place, is asset visibility and access visibility.
That's an interesting point, because it's not only in the IT world, if it comes to authentication and all this stuff, I mean, it's in the OT world much more complex, because as well of the physical assets, access on these assets and how to manipulate them. One question regarding as well the difference regarding IT and OT. To me, it's like if you go into the IT world, you have the full bunch of possibility on securing communications. I mean, do two-factor authentication and other stuff like that. And then I'm coming into this OT world where you have to deal with new stuff, like you have all the full internet protocols, internet security layers, whatever capabilities. And then you have this, let's say, nasty but highly optimized OT protocols, which are, let's say, they are robust, they are designed for operational reliability, and they have less security in their design. So how to deal with that? I mean, it's there and you can't get rid of it. There are certain reasons why these protocols are designed like they are, because to be more resilient against other disturbance, which are, let's say, electromagnetic disturbance or whatever. So how to, I mean, they are there. So how to deal with that, with this a little bit more complicated world on how to implement authentication and security? So any one of you wants to share your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit on that. I totally agree with Don's perspective on the simplistic approach, right? Keep it simple, do the basic blocking and tackling, and then work your way up. But when you're talking about insecure protocols, you're talking about older operating systems, you really need to get down to the communication level to control what that protocol is doing and who's actually originating the protocol. Totally susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks. If somebody comes into your environment with an unsecure protocol and starts sniffing with Wireshark, they'll see what's going on. So your best use or best case scenario there is start microsegmentation based upon communication, transmit, receives, and also based upon protocol. Get as deep as you can in the stack with regard to protection, but understanding that you have to take some sort of approach to protect that. The protocols are going to change; they'll become more secure, but that's not reality today. Reality today is you're looking at open, unsecure protocols. So you basically need to control what that protocol can do in your environment, and also who can actually create the commands to make changes in the environment. So just get down to the lowest level and start micro segmentation, if you will.
I'd like to jump off that, Jim. I agree. We as an OEM are moving to secure communications as well. So secure comms, Modbus security, things like that. And one of the challenges there is, in reality, it's probably going to take a long time before all those encrypted comms are in an OT environment, especially when you have a mixed Schneider Electric and other OEM environment. A lot of customers will downgrade that encrypted piece. And a lot of customers want that visibility into their OT networks. So to your point, microsegmentation and really understanding DPI of OT protocols is extremely important, even down to the register and to the count, right? And I think that is a very important piece that we are going to see here for a very long time, while we wait for the industry to adopt more of these secure encrypted comms within OT. It would take a long time.
So great conversation. You guys are deep into this. I love it. I do think there's some ongoing efforts that we can leverage in this arena. And when you talk about the design of the system, which we're not redesigning, we have to go back and redesign some things and replace. I agree, because some things you just can't fix the way they're currently configured. It's another discussion. But there is a need for hardware assurance and software assurance standards in the space, so that you can actually have system security engineering making trades when they design information systems or design industrial control systems in that space for critical infrastructure. SAE 32 has a cyber physical systems effort that's trying to document the risk assigned to hardware assurance vulnerabilities, software assurance vulnerabilities, so system security engineers can actually make trades when they design those systems. And also NIST has an Internet of Things advisory board ongoing right now in open forum, meets on a monthly basis, that industry can participate in as well. And they're looking at how to basically describe that future Internet of Things. Maybe some specific concentrations on what's a smart city mean, and how do you have this need for information, this need to share and protect information. If you think about the fact that you're going to have a smart city with smart traffic control, and you're driving in an autonomous vehicle, and you've got real-time feedback on all the sensors, you might be able to travel at 100 miles an hour. But if the sensors are not giving you you're getting a time delay, and you're not seeing the sensor information in advance, you may have to slow that smart vehicle down to 50 miles per hour because you don't have the trust and confidence of the data feeds, as often as you would have expected them. You guys follow?
Yeah, no, to me, it's a rather interesting discussion, because let's be very practical. So I'm a shop floor manager. I mean, a shop floor manager maybe is not thinking about a cybersecurity. It's more about downtime of his shop floor and quality of his output and how material is flowing on the shop floor. However, now this nasty cybersecurity stuff is coming in because it's a risk. It's more a risk of downtime. Let's say it in that way. It's a disturbance in his. So now we have a concept like micro-segmentation, which is, to be honest, it's great. I think that's the answer. But if I'm a shop floor manager and I will go to my management and will tell them, let's introduce micro-segmentation. I think it will reduce my risks on the shop floor. So what are the best arguments for people out there to convince their management that they should invest in something which is not increasing the quality and not increasing the output of the shop floor. So what would be the arguments to convince his management?
I can think of one. So, think of it as the security level and what it is, what maturity level do you wish to be at? One of the things nice about the microsegmentation piece is it's really can be designed to be placed in front the crown jewels of the organization, and that would be maybe a $5 million robotic arm, as an example, right? I think that mature customers will quickly adopt that type of microsegmentation when they are looking from a business continuity perspective and are looking from an environmental health and safety perspective. So microsegmentation under safety is certainly a way to get through that adoption, And when that microsegmentation works in our unique characteristics in OT, such as legacy protocols, unique processes, we're serving a very critical purpose to society as a whole with these OT environments. And so as long as the zero trust or the microsegmentation is able to respect those OT architectures, and we've proven that out with several offers that we have today, then I think that maybe we have a business case there that goes directly to the CISO and the risk manager for protecting some of their crown jewels.
Which is interesting because in this session, we are talking about zero trust and cybersecurity, but your answer at is, well, don't discuss with them about cybersecurity, discuss with them about the operational risks.
Exactly.
Health, safety, environment.
Exactly.
Downtime.
Because that's what they care about. That's what the shop floor cares about, right?
Yeah.
They don't care about the sexiness of cybersecurity.
So I think that when you think about this space, security does not stand alone. I mean, so it's we should be looking at a future smart, interconnected world that's safe and secure. And what we've learned in quality and we've learned in safety, we can actually migrate into the security world. And I think that's true for both IT and OT.
Yeah, and I think microsegmentation, specifically on this topic, is pretty far down the continuum, right? There's a lot to do before you get there. Basic blocking and tackling, understanding the environment, asset inventory, stop reusing passwords, stop sharing administrative credentials. So there's so much to do before you get there. That's again, you're not going to start with a shop floor manager and introduce microsegmentation to them. You're going to start introducing some basic security practices first and build his confidence, right? And that's kind of the continuum of developing the human aspect of cybersecurity and their faith actually in what you can accomplish without impacting operations.
That's great. We have a great question from the audience, and this is as well, I think, at the heart of cyber. It's a great question. So I have no name, but the question was, if you are not critical infrastructure, how realistic is that you will be hit by an ICS-specific attack? It seems most of the non-critical infrastructure attacks have been caused downtime because the IT side have been impacted by ransomware, and then they shut down OT. So, so what is the likelihood that there will be a specific attack on OT?
So while you guys are thinking about it, I think it's not likely you'll be specifically attacked, but I do think that the attacks will bleed over. And so it becomes an issue, even though it's an attack on critical infrastructure, something in control of smart energy or work in that arena, it's going to spill over because it's going to be based on the PLCs that it's attacking that are probably used everywhere. And so therefore, there is a high likelihood that you're going to be impacted. It's not likely you'll be specifically targeted.
Yes, and just for the audience out there, we have seen, I mean, really we have seen such attacks like Stuxnet and others, which are specific OT for specific motivations, let's say it in that way. The motivation was not ransomware, but of course, OT is a critical target for certain attackers with different motivations. It's maybe not a ransomware. Maybe for ransomware, you're just affected by the IT. Yeah.
So I think that we have a lot of bleed over, like you said. I think that you're right. The IT networks tend to be the place to bleed over into the OT networks, the cyber attacks. But we do have sophisticated nation-state threat actors, and it is complicated to attack OT. Understanding the process of OT, it requires a lot of expertise. Okay, so it's not as simple as IT in that sense to attack OT when you have safety systems involved, ensuring that set points and things like that are not bypassed to cause a cyber physical event. But we do have nation states and that type of advanced threat actor, and we must be prepared with that as well. So it really will depend on how we define critical infrastructure and how the customer sees themselves as part of that critical infrastructure. And I can see a lot of CISA in the US collaborating with that and updating their guidance to help improve that definition and assist with that sort of a type of an attack. So I think that it's both. It's both. It's definitely a lot of spillover. It's ransomware. It's profit. It's that kind of thing. But it's also there can be the very targeted attack as well, and we have to be prepared for that too.
Yeah, totally agree. See a lot of bleed over from IT, especially with ransomware, targeted nation state on critical infrastructure, bulk energy, distribution, oil and gas. Yeah, those are the focuses. But don't discount intellectual property, processes, manufacturing, information about how things are made. That's still valuable, if you will. So I wouldn't discount it. But again, the likelihood is probably lower of a targeted specific attack, more likely in manufacturing to be bleed over, and totally agree with the other panelists. The nation state, the critical infrastructure stuff is a lot more likely to be a focused target.
Yeah. And I think if I were to add, this is where microsegmentation may come in. We're talking about these advanced nation states because we're trying to take a coupled system and be able to decouple it in a way that it does it safely, right? And segment off those types of threats in a way that don't cause larger impacts to the overall plan. So, yeah, I agree that the likelihood may not be high, but the impact is and the consequence is extremely high. So we have to take the consequence and go up rather than just looking down for more likelihood.
Yeah. And I just want to keep in mind that as well, the attack space is changing. I mean, for several reasons. It's like we see the attacker industry is turning more to SaaS-based models, so where they just give their knowledge and their tools rent for ordinary people. So you don't need to be a high sophisticated hacker anymore. You can just rent the tools and carry out an attack on SCADA systems and whatever. So the tools are out there. And as well, beside the nation state attackers, what we've seen is as well on the hacktivism space that there's a lot of things going on, especially now with these geopolitical struggles we have in the moment. We've seen websites where there had been completely instructions for newbies, no people who are doing hacking, a completely instruction how to hack a SCADA system, just to tear down a specific shop floor or manufacturer or company in a target country. With all tools published, all instructions, you don't need to be a hacker. It's just simple the motivation to motivate other people's being a hacker and being a tool of sabotage. So I think this is a completely new perspective. It's like what we have to change in our mind is the perspective of threat. It's for ransomware, we always think like, oh, it's IT and people want to steal Bitcoins as well. That has changed with all these companies having their backup systems in place. We've seen now IP and data theft is as well a very valuable business model. So it's the business models are turning. It's a very vibrant space. So by that, I think zero trust for OT is a very, very good concept you should consider. Yeah. So great. So micro-segmentation. Okay, this is one possibility.
I was going to piggyback the comment I think Jim made about intellectual property. So often we talk about the attack is an attack just to stop availability or to change the integrity of the data. Sometimes it's just to read and collect data. And that confidentiality issue is the fact that you may have something coming through your OT system that will be IP. It would be the way your system is designed that you would not want others to know. And so the theft of intellectual property is actually a big threat in this arena.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a good point. I mean, I like that. When we think about OT intellectual property, it's a little different, right? It's about, like, maybe you look at some of these attacks, right? The way the HMI is presenting its data, right, and how it's being presented. Those are screen files that are being run back there. It gives a map of that process, and we need to be concerned not just with the availability thing, but a denial of view, right, or a denial of control, a denial of view, or a manipulation of the data for a man-in-the-middle attack, right? Which it's the intellectual property is really interesting. Like, I like to think about screen files. What does the operator see? Because he sees it's a human-machine interface, right? If that's changed or modified in a way, that can be very dangerous to the process.
Yeah, the thing I was thinking about in the space is the fact is I'm a proponent of the fact we're going to need to have visibility into all of these devices, all these connected devices. And I talk about that being the digital thread or the digital bill of materials, but that is both a need to share and protect. So if there's going to be a ton of data collected in that digital thread, you have to protect that information because that actually becomes an attack map as well, right? So you actually see, what the devices are, what they're doing, how you could spoof them and work that arena. So you have to protect that data as well as share it with the right partners.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have another question from Ivan Felsman. Oh, this is very, very specific, very technical, but it's Ian asks, port forwarding is an enabler for remote attacks to manipulate from a far off location. Do you see any easy way to disrupt this and by their sabotage on hacker efforts? I mean, this is paying into zero trust because it's a question who is sending the data, where the commands are coming from. So any one of you wants to bring in an answer on this?
I'll make an attempt. I see a couple ways to disrupt this. I guess one is that remote access into these OT environments. We prefer, our preference would be to use technologies that are industrial remote access based and not simply VPN based, that essentially allow for view only or of the data in the OT environment, separating the trusted from the non-trusted in that environment. So, when I think about port forwarding, trying to understand that purview model, where you're referring to it. Is it to the IT environment or is it somewhere else? It's a good question. And let the other ones try to tackle it as well.
Because I think the question is authentication.
Because why would port forwarding even be used in this case is what I was thinking.
Exactly. And to me, it's somehow, the question of remote access and remote maintenance access are super critical, because what we see is, of course, like you have a certain device, a certain asset, a certain machine which is running in your zero trust environment, let's say on a security based condition, and then you're turning this machine into a remote maintenance status, which means from a risk level it's more exposed. So how do you deal with that? What is the best advice? Because there's definitively there are good reasons for remote maintenance, but how do you deal with that change of risk and how to manage the risk and for that?
I'll take a jump on that if you don't mind. So, industrial secure remote access is very different, and it needs to have a vendor access management that works for the various different stakeholders for the customer, which could include the OEMs for their access. It could include other contractors or their own employees. We have some customers that are able to walk around with a tablet and see their industrial processes while they're at the plant, and in some cases can even control. So it needs to be done securely, though, and there are ways to do it. I mean, let's be honest. We can have Mars rover. We can do secure remote access. Okay, it can be done. It's been done for a long time in the financial services industry. It can be done. There are ways to do it, and I think we have some very good technologies out there that are already out there today that are helping many customers achieve that state and even NERC step approved and that sort of thing.
It's like fun fact story. I know from a very, very, very high sophisticated hack for a very high valuable OT environment. And the hack was not done on the regular base. It was done when all the checks have been in place to check the delivery of the IT and OT vendors, which means it was not a regulatory secured remote maintenance. It was a mode where security had been was not already installed, or let's say to do all the checks, you need to lower your security barriers. And I think that's a very interesting fact that the attackers had been in the system during checking the delivery and the installation remotely and doing that check, which means like our security perception is sometimes wrong. It's like we have to look, what is the stage of your environment and what is the stage of the security and what are the opportunities?
Yeah, this discussion gets into why I thought that air gap question at the very beginning. I'm glad to see people, understanding you're not really air gap, because many people thought their systems were air gap. And when you start asking about, well, how do you do training? And what do you hook to when you do training? When you do maintenance, what systems do you hook to when you do maintenance? You bring a laptop in that has nothing to do with security, and you're running something on a laptop that may have a virus on it that now is propagated into your system, right? So that's an interesting construct of what you're saying. That is when the security is diminished or security is turned off in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly. I mean, that's to me, that's the nuggets. If you are a very high sophisticated attackers, that's usually the nuggets you're looking for. And then people are telling about air gap and we are safe and secure, which is wrong perception. Yeah.
And I think of the word air gap. I used to have a nice presentation. I wish I had it with me today. It shows Tom Cruise hanging off of a Mission Impossible, hanging inside the control room, literally suspended in the air, and he's got gloves on to touch the machine. He's not even touching anything else in the environment. But we do have some things that are technically, they are downstream from the process. They're really down deep in the process, and they may not be able to be updated centrally or even monitored centrally. So in that sense, there can be industrial assets that are, dare I say the word, air gap, right? And where we need to be able to do advanced type of technologies or inspection around those assets in a more offline manner than a connected manner that you would normally have in an IT environment. We do have those, absolutely.
And then the monitoring may be different during that phase, right? So because you're connecting, because you're giving access, you monitor the communications or what the payloads that are delivered during that segment, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So if I look in this concept, I have two possibilities. One, I'm able to build a completely new production site, best case. But as we know, sometimes this is not a usual case. Most times we have already, production plants are growing. They're a living ecosystem. So Jim, where do I start for both cases? Like first, the easy one, green. I have the green field. I can just start with that, and then I have this brown field.
Yeah, you're right. Greenfield's easy, right? Because you can plan it into the process. You plan it into the build. So it's just about completing or determining your baseline for protection and then building that into your infrastructure as you're going along with Greenfield. Very easy because everything's being tested in conjunction with each other, right? As you build the Greenfield. Brownfield's a little more difficult, but it's still very achievable. I'm going to speak in general terms. Generally, there are maintenance cycles still within the environment where you can affect change during that maintenance cycle, do your testing. How you introduce the security is another factor, especially with zero trust. Are you going into a monitor phase first, or are you building your protection in line? So deployment capabilities, deployment scenarios come into play a lot, especially when you go to the testing or the conceptual phase in brownfield. But the important thing to remember in brownfield is you do not want to interrupt operations. You don't want to break anything. You shouldn't be restarting things. And that's part of the criteria, right? So as you're developing your baseline security strategy for either zero trust or just building your basic foundational bricks for security, part of that process is working within the maintenance cycles and then testing, test, constant testing. You don't want to break anything.
Yeah, I think the greenfield brownfield thing is interesting, especially in today's world, because we have now here, particularly in the U.S., a lot of federal funds available for digital modernization, right? For sustainability, for energy efficiency, and that amount of, you know, whether it be a water treatment plant or a building, that allows for this more digitalization, which includes cybersecurity, certainly, and it allows for us to add in a lot more advanced technologies at the beginning. So I think that as we're leveraging federal funds and customers are leveraging modernization efforts, it's not so much a greenfield, brownfield thing anymore. It's about modernization and how do we make a carbon neutral world? How do we get to more efficient uses of power and that sort of thing, which Schneider Electric is certainly always focused on, right? So I just wanted to add that. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it's no, thank you very much. We had a second question, a question from David Stevens, and that's as well very interesting. It's like, because we are always talking about, yes, we are preventing the attackers from getting into the systems and compromise them, but hey, what's in case the breach already happens? So what are the concepts there for breach containment?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really interesting. I like to jump into that. I find this fascinating. So, you know, when you look at the journey in cybersecurity and the customer journey, you have corrective controls, right? You may have backup, you may have a hot spare, you may have redundant networks, right? You hope you never use those type of controls. Then you have the detective controls, you know, the visibility that we talked about, having all this visibility, and but you know, the visibility is great, but if you're talking to nation state threat actor, you don't have a lot of time to take that visibility into actionable prevention, right? And then you got the preventive controls, right? That they have to be brought into the environment very safely, right? And proven to work within that process, right? But those are going to give you the quickest and most immediate ROI on your security investment. But to your point, you know, taking human intelligence and applying it to machine intelligence at the rapid speed is where this industry needs to head, in my opinion, especially if we're talking about critical infrastructures.
Yeah, and if I could just comment on that, the idea that you have to bring your C-suite together to have a tabletop discussion on this is really critical in this arena, because it actually raises visibility for, if you were to have a hack, what would the impact be? What are your courses of action to contain the breach? And how do you go about that? So I think that the concept is important, but I think that if you don't have the C-suite exposure from a tabletop perspective, if the breach were to happen, you're going to spend a lot of time spinning them up for what the courses of action are. So preparation with tabletop exercise is really important in this arena.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to that point, to David's question, when you're talking about segmentation, we talked about micro segmentation down at the protocol level, but there's a more of a macular view of segmentation also, especially when you get into manufacturing, production capabilities, or production facilities, where you have multiple lines or multiple zones, containment zones, that I would recommend splitting a shop floor or a manufacturing type of environment into, so that if you do have bleed over from IT into a specific system, that system cannot compromise your entire shop floor. So that's part of more of the macro segmentation, if you will, who can communicate with whom, and then you get down to some of the micro segmentation concepts.
Yeah, and to me, it's as well part of the business continuity management. So if you have the cyber perspective in there, and you know what are the critical assets on your shop floor, and how you can build more resilience in there in terms of a breach, that's as well, I think, a very important aspect. I mean, We have seen a lot of companies when they got a cyber attack that they have shut down everything in panic. Let's say it in that way, shutting down everything in panic. I mean, it's okay because you don't know what's going on, but being more prepared to do that in a controlled way, it's much better for everybody. I think the health of the people on the shop floor, the health of your IT department, but as well the health of your business. So be prepared. I think that's the most important message. And put in your board. Gentlemen, we are almost at the end of our show here. I would like to give you each of you the possibility to do a little wrap up and just bring in your position. And before we do this, I would give as well the audience the possibility to join our last poll. So and the last poll question is, are you interested in connecting with TX1? Just say a yes or a no. It's very important here as well for all the people running IIoT world. This would be not possible doing this without any sponsors. By that, it's very important. And yeah, let's say as well a big thanks to everybody who is supporting the show here, especially the sponsor of this session, TX1. We can't run this without you. Thank you very much. And by that, just giving you the last chance to bring in your views. And I would like to start with Ed.
Sure. So I'd just like to say that, this topic on Zero Trust, our focus has been based on 6443, 4-1, 4.2, 4-2, and at the system level, 3-3 and 3-2. While the 6444 series doesn't explicitly speak on Zero Trust, we believe the standard does implicitly demonstrate that Zero Trust is going through the various security levels based off the risk that the customer is trying to mitigate, security level 1 through 4. And so we've been exploring Zero Trust and comparing it to the 6443 standard, and we see similarities and we see gaps. But overall, our focus is helping our customers achieve greater resiliency. And we do that with our advanced cybersecurity consultants and OT engineers. Implementing this Zero Trust strategy, no matter where the customers are on their journey, really is best done with that veteran experience, in our opinion, that understands both IT and OT. And fit that purpose to that operational environment. I'm a big proponent of microsegmentation. I think it's critically important in our environments. And I think that when we move up higher security levels, security level 2 and 3, we're definitely going to see a lot more of that in our environments, in our industrial environments. So thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
And by that, just let's give Don the possibility as well to share.
Real quick one, thank you to IIoT and Lucian for inviting me, letting me participate. Mirko, great job facilitating, and the fellow panelists. I just think that it's important that people stay engaged in all the public-private efforts that are ongoing. And I think that all of us are looking for standards, commercially acceptable global sourcing standards that'll help us in hardware assurance, software assurance, and assured services in our supply chains to support IT and OT.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Jim.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, thank you to all the panelists and all the participants. Really appreciate your time. Yeah, TX1 is focused on prevention. That's what we do, prevention, protection. But there's a lot to do before that. So we can help you get there. There's a lot of information out there. But if you need help with that strategy of implementing the Zero Trust type of environment, happy to help. Again, appreciate your participation.
Thank you very much. And by that, I say thanks as well to our audience and all the people of IoT World for joining. My name was Mirko Ross. It was a pleasure to be the host of this session. And if you like the Manufacturing Day, just step into our next session. And the next session will be securing the ICS software supply chain as well. An awesome topic, to be honest, and very important. So step into this session. Thank you very much for listening, for your time. And if you want to get in touch with our panelists, we have all the contact data ready. Just ask them, connect with them. I mean, they are all great experts. And by that, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.